That's quite big. Impressive.
So, Elden Ring. You ever heard of it? Of course you have, because everyone seems to have beaten the game like 16 times already, and I barely just finished my first playthrough. However, I wanted to make sure that I experienced as much of the game possible before talking about it, and it took me a month. But better late than never, so without further ado, this is the Elden Ring experience. First off, this game is fucking big, if that wasn't already evident from my 78 hours on one playthrough, but it's like really big. When you first hop in, you see the map and you're like, damn, that's a good size. But later you find out that, damn, that is larger. It puts into perspective when you realize that the underground areas are bigger than most open world games. With so much content, you're probably going to need multiple playthroughs to fully experience everything, so keep that in mind before buying. I will also preface this by saying I'm sure this game isn't for everyone. It takes some kind of special masochistic behavior to solo bosses underleveled while constantly getting one shot, and limited returns once you actually beat them, but that just so happens to be what I'm into. Elden Ring has had everyone's hype for multiple years, transforming Dark Souls' linear style into an open world experience, and even enlisting the writing of prominent authors like George R.R. Martin.
And his wiener is about this big.
Safe to say, game slaps. Going into the game I knew I was going to like it, just because of how much I enjoy the rest of the series, but honestly it surprised me. Nowadays it's rare that a game can captivate me enough to finish one playthrough, but with Elden Ring I already have multiple playthroughs planned after my first. I could easily put over 1,000 hours in the game and still be trying out new stuff, and that's because of content. There's so much shit in terms of the map, builds, and PvP, so I'm going to do my best to go over things that I enjoyed the most and the things that I do wish were different. I'll start with the story. Yep. Alright, moving on. I'm sorry, I feel like I can't give a fully fledged assessment of the story and its contents without experiencing every ending and doing all of the NPC quests. Which that is going to take some time because every damn NPC we encounter seems to have like a 20-part quest line. And even when I'm done with that, I'll still probably be confused. But the bits and pieces that I can make sense of, I enjoyed, so there's that. Starting off on the game, I like that we had different classes than the usual Souls games. I was incredibly tempted to pick Prisoner, but ended up going with Samurai because I am a weeb. Turns out Samurai is fucking busted. After doing our tutorial on how to die, we were put in the vast area of Limgrave and are immediately told by this fuck L plus Ratio plus Maidenless plus Touch Grace plus Tarnish plus Ungrafted plus Don't Care You level Dex. Little does he know that even at the end of the game, I still had no maidens. Limgrave is also where our choices begin. We can literally go anywhere, west towards the coastline, east towards the Lake of Agheel, or just walk forward 20 steps and get your ass beat by a tree sentinel. Having so many crossroads so early just shows that we are truly choosing our own path, whereas in something like DS3, the first time we can really choose where to go is to whether fight the Crystal Sage or Abyss Watchers first. This continues through the entire game. You can choose to progress among quote-unquote main routes, but even that isn't clearly defined. You'd never have to take the exact same path as another player in order to beat the game. Navigating this world isn't too bad, especially after getting Torrent, but you'll definitely find yourself going off the beaten path sometimes. You might discover some ruins, a cave, catacombs, teleporters, NPCs, new gear, gravity, or literally nothing.
There's nothing.
Thank you, son.
That's the beauty, though, of open world games. You don't know what awaits you around each corner. Of course, the entire map isn't revealed to you at first, but you can very easily unlock it by just looking for these pillar icons. I'd often beeline it to those just so I could see what I was working with, and definitely recommend doing the same. You'll quickly find out that we have a ton of different areas with unique aesthetics and enemies. From the vast fields of Limgrave to the golden capital of Leyndell to the red of Caelid. Every area did have a certain charm, but nothing, at least to me, compared to the crumbling Forum of Azula. Fucking floating coliseums with tornadoes and dragons? It just doesn't get cooler than that. I really enjoyed parts where I was randomly exploring and I'd come across a cave or a teleporter or an elevator and was in a completely different area than before. It kept the game fresh. Bit confusing at points, but it was cool when I just randomly spawned in at the capital when having never been in that area. I also thought we had a good variety of enemies that made sense in their areas. Definitely some lazy designs and reused assets, but still pretty solid. I genuinely believe if you wanted to try and explore every inch of the map, it would take at least 100 hours. That exploration is definitely worth it. As I said, there's numerous things to find, but obviously the most appealing is new weapons and armor. Armor's super cool in this game. You can look like an absolute edgelord, a homeless person, a thick boy, or this.
Looking like a double-wide surprise.
We have the same fun ways to fight as in previous FromSoft games and a ton of super cool additions. We can fight directly on our horse, which can be both really good and really bad depending on the situation. I more so use Torn in combat to close gaps on bosses like the Fire Giant who like to socially distance themselves, and it made fights like that way less annoying. We also have Spirit Summons. These allow us to summon different enemies to fight alongside us in combat and can be leveled up just like a weapon. I try to avoid using any summons on main bosses, but sometimes on optional bosses I called in the only bitch that I can trust. Myself. We have sorcery, faith, intelligence, all that cool shit, but now we can literally summon a fucking dragon. That is peak gameplay. But the weapons themselves was what I found to most enjoy. We have a ton of different and unique weapons, but now we can fully customize our loadouts with Ashes of War. Ashes of War are essentially weapon arts that you can loot from bosses, enemies, or just find on the map. Let's say you have a weapon you like, but the weapon art is a bit you can go to a Grace and change that weapon art so long as it's not a boss weapon to something that you want, and you can also dual wield. At one point I had a twin blade with bleed on my offhand, then a twin blade with frost on my main that also had the weapon art Black Flame Tornado. And the super cool thing is that unlike games like DS3 where you're kind of locked into one infusion and need gems, you can switch Ashes of War and affinities as much as you want. Fight an enemy who's weak to bleed and then quickly swap over to a holy build. It's so cool and I love trying out different combinations on my run, but Black Flame Tornado greater than all. This is where I was going to write a transition, but I couldn't come up with one, so yeah, boss time. This is what people care about. It's the main cool factor of the game and also the most rage-inducing. Elden Ring has 120 bosses. A majority of these bosses are optional though and won't need to be completed to beat the game. You very well could only fight like 15 bosses for the entire game. All you need is 2 Great Runes in order to access the capital, and then there's only a few main bosses after that. I've looked around a bit and most people are saying it's about 13 mandatory fights. In my first playthrough, I probably did like 90 to 100. I would probably not do this again unless I was going for a 100% run, but I wanted to explore and experience as much of the map as possible on my first playthrough. Talking about each boss will simply take too long, and I doubt people will care about my opinion on like the 5 burial watchdog fights. Instead, I'll talk about the shard bearers, the ones that give you the Great Runes, and some of the other required bosses. Shard bearers include Godric, Morgott, Malenia, Radahn, Mohg, Renala, Rykard, and Ranni. Ranni, however, gave up her Great Rune so you don't have to fight her, but she has a questline that you can complete. First off, Godric, miss the hand jobs. This is one of the first fights where I figured out how good jumping is in combat. Because not only can you jump to avoid attacks, jumping attacks are great to cause stagger and do a shit ton of damage. The fight itself wasn't too difficult, just learning to deal with some of the delayed attacks, which you'll see is a common theme in Elden Ring. The cutscene into the dragon phase was absolutely brutal, but it didn't make him that much stronger.
Are you sure about that?
Overall, about 10 to 15 tries. I went and did Radahn next, but because I hate myself, I decided to fight him without summons, under-leveled, and pre-patch 1.03. It was definitely the incorrect decision, and the dopamine wasn't strong enough to make up for the time loss, but the fight is pretty fucking cool, so the 110 or so tries it took, I was still having fun. Renala's fight is just Deacons 2.0, the first phase being just as easy and the only threat being smacked in the head with knowledge. The second phase has a super dope arena, but again it's not too difficult if you can avoid the strong sorceries and take out her spirit summons quickly. The main use for Renala though is to respec, so you'll want to do this fight. Rykard has a similar gimmick to Yorm from DS3, but I still think it was a gimmick done right. He has multiple phases and can definitely kill you if you aren't careful, whereas in the Yorm fight, it's like over in 30 seconds. Morgott was a pretty epic fight, honestly. Loved the arena right outside the Erd Tree, and I think he had some sick abilities. The mix of delayed and spam attacks along with some abilities definitely gave me a bit of trouble, but overall took about 1 to 2 hours. I guess you could say he more got fucked. This next boss, what was her name again? Throughout this entire fight, all I was thinking was, wow, I have no info here. I'd really like it if you identified yourself so that I could know who I am fighting. Well, thankfully, I spent 8 hours fighting this boss, so her name is permanently etched into my fucking skull. Malenia is not a hard boss. I know that sounds like copium given the information I just presented, but I believe it. She is a strong boss with 1 or 2 difficult moves to dodge. The one that killed me about 95% of the time was her waterfall ability. You know which one I'm talking about if you fought her. I spent so long trying to figure out how to dodge this damn move, because if you get caught in it, you're pretty much dead. I've seen a video of someone dodging the first part, but I was never able to do so, but I was eventually able to deal with it. This move is also in her second phase, and even harder to tell when it's going to happen because of all of the aerial attacks, so I'll just say good luck, have fun. The thing I found actually most annoying about the fight is the second phase. Her wings block most of her body and it can be pretty difficult to tell when she's attacking, and because you often roll behind her, that is not ideal. But yeah, first try Malenia easy. The last great rune boss is Moke, who I actually fought after beating the game because I just missed his area. The fight would have been a pushover if it wasn't for the bleed. He has flame attacks and bleed, and those flames will cause blood loss. In the second phase, like 80% of the arena is covered in flames, so you just end up passively building bleed on yourself. However, once I swapped for a talisman with robustness, the fight became pretty easy. A couple other of the mandatory fights I'll mention will be the Fire Giant, Malekith, Godfrey, and Radagon. Fire Giant is required for you to advance to the Forge of the Giants. I thought it was a really dope fight. The absolute stature of this man and the fact that he has a full beard on his stomach, top tier. The moves are really cool and I like the weak spot mechanic he has. However, the fight is very slow. He likes to do this lay down and roll move that creates a ton of distance. Running back to him takes forever, so I recommend just hopping on Torrent to close distance, but it still makes for one of the longer fights in the game. Malekith is one of, if not the coolest bosses in the game. The Malekith fight is needed to acquire the Rune of Death so that you can kill a god. And I'll be honest, I had way more trouble in his Beast Clergyman phase. Whereas most bosses in this game were a fan of delayed attacks, Malekith was just swinging away. I ended up dying to stupid projectiles way more than I should have, but that's on me. The second phase though has some of the coolest looking abilities in the game. The Black Blade ability will actually lower your health for a brief period and can make you more susceptible to getting one shot. Overall though, super aesthetically pleasing both from the boss and the arena. Godfrey was another awesome fight. His first phase is nothing special, it's actually one of the more easy ones, but that cutscene into the second phase was absolutely bonkers. To my knowledge, I can't remember another boss that used hand-to-hand combat in a Souls game. It was a nice change of pace, but Godfrey was really out here beating our ass WWE style. The final boss is Radagon into the Elden Beast. The Radagon fight gave me heavy Mortal Shell vibes with the arena's aesthetic, his weapon, and even the abilities. His fight was super fun, again not incredibly challenging, but had a lot of fun moves to dodge out. The Elden Beast was both a great fight and a disappointing fight. The arena and soundtrack is absolutely magical, and the fact that we were fighting some Loch Ness lightbulb looking ass was unique to say the least. I only wish the fight was a bit more challenging. I know final bosses don't always have to be the most difficult, but this one felt honestly too easy. Overall though, I was impressed by the design of most bosses. They look fucking sick, had some sick arenas, and sick moves to dodge. There's way too many to note. It's literally just like boss rush the game, but some of my favorites were Dragon Lord Placidusax, Malekith, Regal Ancestor Spirit, Godfrey, and Radagon. With all of what I just said, and even as good of a game as Elden Ring is, I did have some issues. I'll first stay on the boss topic. 120 is a fuck ton. Granted, as I've said, there are a ton of optional bosses that you don't need to do, but a lot of these bosses are just reused content or will appear multiple times in the game. You have multiple Crucible Knights, Burial Watchdogs, Godskins, Tree Sentinels, and many more. I know specific rewards are tied to each fight, but I would have rather just found items like that in the world rather than fighting essentially the same boss multiple times. I don't have a problem with the catacombs or caves that you can find throughout the map, but I will admit they become pretty tedious. Bloodborne has its Chalice dungeons that kind of work in the same way, just instead in Elden Ring you find them throughout the world, which I think is a fine change. I will say one thing that I have never understood with Souls games is when they have one enemy as a boss, with a boss health bar, and then later in the game you'll just encounter them as normal enemies. I mean, that goes as far back as Dark Souls 1, with enemies like the Capra Demon and Taurus Demon appearing in the Demon Ruins separate from the boss fights, but I never understood why. I also found the rune farming at times to be really strange. Fighting some big ass dragon might give you 6k souls, but you can just roll up to some fucking fish people and get free backstab kills and make multiple times that in a fraction of the time. The distribution, especially in early game of runes from enemies, definitely seemed weird, but at no point did I think that I was severely underleveled or had to grind just to stay alive. So other than that and some cut and reused content, I can't think of another thing gameplay-wise that I really didn't enjoy. But the technical aspects definitely had a few issues. One issue that a lot of people, specifically on PC, had was the optimization. People were lagging and crashing despite having way above the minimum requirements to play the game. I even experienced some lag and a few crashes while running on a Ryzen 9 5900 and a 3080, which should never happen.
But you're also probably thinking, damn Tony, that's a pretty good rig. I wish I could get one like that. And oh boy, do I have some news for you, because you most definitely can, because I am partnered with Apex Gaming PCs. You can go ahead and check out my very own line of custom PCs that I help create on their website and actually purchase one for yourself. It's a really great company, and if you find something you like, you can even use code Tony for an additional 5% off. So that link will be in the description. Let's get back to the video. Some areas like graces and mausoleums would glitch out and you'd have to reload to fix them. It's not a big issue, but I figured I'd mention it. There also appears to be some type of buffer with your inputs in the game. I had so many instances where I'd be in a fight, try to roll an attack, get hit, and then immediately after my character would roll again, causing me to get hit by another. I know if you panic roll that's going to happen, and I'm sure a few times that was the case, but it happened way too frequently for that to be the main culprit. With a game of this scale, it's expected that there are going to be some bugs, but overall the game is incredible. There's a reason why so much hype is created around FromSoft games. They put an immense amount of care in creating a fantastic experience from start to finish. Yeah, you might fucking hate your life at some points and question why you're even playing, but the satisfaction of progressing, beating a super difficult boss is like no other. If you don't want to take my word for it, I think the almost 300,000 reviews on Steam might be a good alternative. With a game with this much content, there's theoretically endless videos I can make, and I plan to make a lot more in the future, but I at least wanted to get this out to document my first experience. If you enjoyed the video, I'd greatly appreciate it if you left a like, comment, and subscribe, but that's all I got for you this time. Hope to see you here again.